Good day, good people. Hey, children. I'm coming with the third part of Unit 5, and this deals with the progressive era. All right, now, if y'all on the slide with me, y'all know we are on do now. This should be number 3. Y'all doing my do now? Because I ain't seen my do nows getting done, so let's get them done. This one asks, if you could fix one problem in your country or community, what would it be? And how would you go about addressing that issue? What policies and laws would you pass? So y'all make sure y'all do the do nows on your paper or drop them in the comments or do something. You better do something. All right, so we're talking about the progressive era. And if you just look at that word progressive era, root word in progressive is, that's right, kids, progress. We want to do better in America. So as more and more people start coming into the country, people start moving west, people start exploring some of the issues that were very prominent in America. You know, like we knew from the beginning that we had some pretty trashy circumstances here. But a lot of those bad habits that America is going to end up adopting comes from like the roots of, a lot of Europeans being the people that established a lot of rules and policies over here in America. So in the latter part of the 1800s, people are going to start questioning some of those things, some of that status quo, the stuff that we just been doing, and start asking like, why do we do that crap? These people are called progressives. So progressives were people who had new ideas and wanted to come up with new laws. They started challenging some of the ideologies that were in American politics. And so, they just started shining a lot of light on some of the negative aspects of our country. So one particular group of progressives that are going to make a lot of noise are called muckrakers. All right, think about muck. Muck is like dirt. Rakers, stirring up dirt. All right, they was a little messy, but muckrakers were basically journalists that wrote articles and books and just information exposing some of the government corruption in America. So let's look at some of those muckrakers. First one up is a dude by the name of Upton Sinclair. Upton Sinclair is actually, crazy thing about it here, my boy really wrote a book trying to expose the harsh living conditions of immigrants. He really wants to expose poverty in America. So basically he goes underground in this meatpacking industry, and he is going to end up writing this expose of all the stuff that he had to endure, like the harsh living conditions and the poor wages, how harmful it was working in a lot of these factories in terms of like there being absolutely no safety precautions in these places. But he writes his book, and in the book he's talking about how, he was talking about how much it sucked to live and in terms of in these impoverished conditions. But he also talked about, I'm working in this factory and there's mold on the meat and people just throwing salt on the mold and cutting the mold off and wrapping the mold off. And then next thing you know, that meat is in your local supermarket. He's talking about how rats and roaches were in the factories, and sometimes those insects and vermin will fall into the meat and then they get sliced up in the doggone meat, and the next thing you know, you got a little rat in your hot dog, and talking about how like everybody in the factory was missing like 2 or 3 fingers. Where them fingers at? They in your ground beefs. You understand what I'm trying to say? So his premise for writing the book was to expose, we need to do better about people living in poverty. But what the people got out of the book is, what's in the meat though, Upton? So this book is called The Jungle, and it actually has some very serious consequences. Everybody ends up reading the book. The book makes it all the way up to Congress members. The president reads the book, and they like, God dang, bro, we've been eating rats and roaches. And so instead of it having the consequences that he wanted to have, like let's do better about paying immigrants more and putting people in safer conditions, it really was like, let's check their meat out though. So because of Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, we're going to get health inspections. People are going to start going into these factories, going into the meatpacking industry. This was located in Chicago. So people started investigating the meatpacking industry. And because of him, we get laws that deal with health inspections. So the first law that was passed was called the Meat Inspection Act. That's going to become the Pure Food and Drug Act. And later on in life, we get the whole FDA. So sorry that your mission wasn't accomplished, Upton, but at least we got good meats now. All right. Next progressive muckraker we're going to talk about is Ida Tarbell. Ida Tarbell actually wrote articles exposing your boy John D. Rockefeller. That's right. Richest man in American history. She's going to expose him. And I know you like, what's her problem with my boy John D? Well, here's the problem. Ida daddy used to have an oil company, and what had happened when your boy John D. Rockefeller came about and he was lowering his prices. Remember I told you that's that horizontal integration. He lowered his prices so much that people like Ida's daddy lost their businesses and they got bought out by John D. Rockefeller. So Ida's dad ends up losing everything to John D. Rockefeller, and he's going to commit suicide. So my girl Ida sort of kind of grow up with a vendetta towards your boy John D. Rockefeller. So she ends up writing this expose on how big business owners like John D. Rockefeller are able to do like a lot of shady stuff because they end up buying into the Congress. Like they have senators and representatives and even the president on their side. And so those people won't pass laws that end up interfering with their business. So she exposes the political corruption behind big businesses. And as a result of her book, like everybody ends up seeing that big businesses are a problem, not just for the consumers, but just overall, like all of the government corruption behind it. And so that is why John D. Rockefeller has to break down the Standard Oil Company. But as I said in our previous video, you still have remnants of, you still paying John D. Rockefeller till this day. No, it ain't called Standard Oil, but it is called BP and Exxon Mobil and Marathon. That's still your boy Rockefeller. All right, other muckrakers that are going to make some noise and cause some changes to happen in America. Lincoln Steffens is going to write the book The Shame of Cities, which really is going to expose harsh living conditions for the impoverished and also a lot of political corruption in the city of Philadelphia. And then there's Jacob Riis, who actually is a photographer. So his book is a bunch of pictures and it showcases the very poor living conditions in these tenements. I mean, I'm telling you, like, people would throw up apartment complexes in days without windows, without plumbing, how all these families got over 20 people in a very small dorm room like space, how diseases were spreading. Like, he actually physically took pictures of this stuff and compiled it in a book. And that's going to raise a lot of concerns as well, because now people can like see what other folks are doing. And his book is called, I don't know if I said it, How the Other Half Lives. So that's that. All right, other progressives that are not muckrakers. You got my girl Jane Addams. Jane Addams is actually going to take the ideal of settlement homes. This is actually something that had been going on in Great Britain for a while. She brings this notion to America. So a settlement home is basically like a place that new people can come, and not just new people. It was for immigrants, but it was also for people who lived in poverty in Chicago. They could come to the homes and have somewhere to live momentarily. She would actually also teach you like basic skills that you need to acclimate to American life, like how to learn and speak English and how to cook, clean, because a lot of immigrants, especially women, would take on jobs as like housekeepers and babysitters. She would teach them how to administer a basic first aid so you can work in hospitals, and also like your legal rights, because a lot of immigrants are going to be targeted by unjust laws to put people in prison. So you would have slaves. That prison system ain't never slavery. I told y'all stay about it. All right. The progressive movement, we're going to see a lot of women on the move. A lot of the Reformation movements that are going to come out during the progressive movement are going to be headed by women. So women are still fighting for the right to vote during this time. Child labor laws are going to be fought for, education, prohibition, and temperance. So let's get to the child labor laws. As I told you guys in the previous video, that like the whole family, when immigrants would come to America, everybody had to go to work because they were getting paid such low wages. So even kids had to work. I mean, children as young as 6 years old. And they like to use babies in these factories because kids got little hands and they could use their little hands to, like, you know, fix little machines or whatnot. And just like, you know, up to Sinclair was talking about how so many men were missing digits and fingers in these factories. Look, kids would get hurt all the time in the factory and get limbs and fingers and all this stuff like chopped off. It's just for real. So children have to go to work like 12 to 19 hours a day. Yeah. You know what saved kids from child labor? Why y'all don't want to go to school? School! Public school! When they instituted public school as a nationwide situation, they got a lot of these kids from working out these factories. So next time you don't want to go to school, just think about the fact you have a little hand in a machine for 12 to 19 hours a day. All right, moving along. Children worked many different jobs during this time, like in factories, like I said, mines, and that mine work was not a game. They used kids in mines because kids were smaller, and so children would have to physically like crawl through the mines, tied to like pounds and pounds of coal in a barrel. They would have to pull that coal through the mines as they like crawled on their hands and knees. And because these kids were working such long hours and it was such like serious work, they would come out of those mines like permanently disfigured. Like fingers would be permanently crippled and their back would be permanently crippled. And that was like an everyday thing. And it wasn't that America did not have child labor laws. They did. They had like 1,600 child labor laws, but they were only for kids that were considered American citizens. So immigrant children had absolutely no rights because they were just seen as the bottom feeders of America and the poor, and nobody cared about poor people. Sad circumstances, but it's real. All right, and I got some pictures of, you can see these babies working in these very harsh conditions in these factories. All right, last little piece of this slide is the progressive era, how it did afflict the African American community. So although some things are going to get better for other communities, not so great for Black folks because Black people are still dealing with a lot of discriminatory practices, especially with voting. So yeah, Black people got the right to vote with the 15th Amendment, Black men did, but there were a lot of things put in place that discouraged the Black folks, such as poll taxes, like you got to pay before you vote. I ain't got no money. Literacy tax, like, oh, you got to take a test. The test would be totally ridiculous. And if you could read the document in English, they would give it to you in another foreign language just to throw you totally off. Or they would have a real physical test that was like 20 ridiculous questions. And if you got one wrong, you failed. So it was really set up for failure. And then lastly, they had the crazy grandfather clause. And now keep in mind, it's the early doggone 1900s, late 1800s rather. And oh, you can't vote unless your granddaddy vote. Girl, my granddaddy was a slave before 1865. So what do we mean? So they just basically set Black people up for failure. They knew you couldn't vote. And even if you did get past all that stuff, the KKK be waiting at the polls for you. So yeah. All right, we're going to see a lot of prominent Black figures come about that are opposing discrimination. We got people like Booker T. Washington, who like preached to hard work, just telling Black people to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. He is going to establish the Tuskegee Institute, and he is going to be an advocate for vocational education. And then we have W.B. Du Bois, who actually did not like your boy Booker T, because Booker T was basically like, we'll do the work. We're not trying to fight necessarily for all equality. And W.B. Du Bois was like, forget that, baby. We want it all. We want equality. We want to be treated the doggone same. He demanded equal treatment for African Americans. All right, yeah, we're going to go to work and all that stuff too, but we vote too, for sure. All right, and W.B. Du Bois is going to get together with a couple of other folks, and they are going to establish the NAACP. I done got ahead of myself. Let me go back now. Jim Crow. So Jim Crow laws are going to be instituted, as we know, like after slavery. And Jim Crow laws are laws that legally separated the races. So basically people of color from white people. And that's when you start seeing the whites only sign and the colored sign. As remember, like white people could go to the colored facilities. People of color could only go to the colored facility. They could not go to white only. This was an offense, like you going to jail for going to a white restaurant or drinking from a white fountain. Well, you hope you go to jail if they don't kill you first, if they see you doing it. All right. And we are going to get a major Supreme Court case that actually challenges the Jim Crow laws. And this is going to happen with Plessy v. Ferguson. It's 1896. So Plessy, let me tell y'all something. That's what I be telling y'all about. Oh, I mixed with this, that, and that. Well, in America, if you had one drop of Black blood, you were considered a whole Negro. Okay, that is the one drop rule, and nobody is gonna demonstrate this more than my boy Homer Plessy. So Homer Plessy is 7/8 white and 1/8 Black. Do you know what that means? You know who Black in his family? a great grandparent. They said that man was all the way black because he had one great grandparent that was black. Okay, so Plessy is going to get on a train. He tries to sit in the whites only car because it's nicer. Their sitting room, they're serving food, is clean. The black car is crowded and there's no sitting room and it's not clean. So he tries to sit in the whites only car. He is going to be told to move to the colored car. He refuses and he gets all the way arrested. So Plessy is going to end up suing. Long story short, it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court makes another bad decision, as they did with the Dred Scott decision. They say that, hey, Plessy was wrong, because it is totally okay to separate black and white people as long as the facilities are equal. And so the law that is going to be passed down, the clause that is going to be passed down, is called separate but equal. It's okay to separate the races as long as the facilities are equal. Now, who went back and made sure that every black theater, school, railroad car, park was equal to that of the white facilities? Nobody. So at the end of the day, it just legalized segregation, which once again was a very poor decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. All right. In light of this, let me go back. We are going to get a new organization. The NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was established in response to the Plessy versus Ferguson circumstance. And the NAACP is just fighting against discrimination. They want equal pay for people of color. They want total voting rights with all of these ramifications for people of color. And the NAACP is like the longest running civil rights organization till this day. All right, last thing on this slide is Ida B. Wells. We also have some women that are speaking out for the rights of African Americans. And Ida B. Wells is going to work to try to stop lynching. She's going to work to try to stop the KKK, and she is going to be the orchestrator of the National Association for Colored Women. And that is it for this slide. And let me know if you got any questions. Take your notes and quiz very soon. Love you guys. Bye.